You and your mother will stay in this 72 square foot storage room. After the renovation of my childhood home was completed, my husband underwent a drastic change. My husband suddenly lashed out, saying he'd been harboring dissatisfaction. He started talking about living with his mother in my renovated family home, which now resembled a brand new house. And he wanted to kick my mother and me out. Filled with memories of my late father, I was shaking with anger at the thought of my childhood home being taken over. My name is Rachel, and I turned 33 this year. I've been married to Michael for 8 years. We both work and have been living with my mother in my childhood home because it's close to our workplace. This arrangement makes Michael, in a sense, a live-in son-in-law. My father passed away before I got married. I hesitated to leave my mother alone and get married, but Michael suggested, if you're worried about leaving your mother alone, let's live together. I was truly happy when he agreed to live in the house my father built for us, even though it was aging. It's full of memories for my mother and me. Michael is the youngest of 3 siblings, and it seems his mother particularly favored the eldest son. He often complained about the stark difference in treatment between his eldest brother and the other brothers. Perhaps his position as the youngest made it easier for him to decide to live in my family home. Hearing his words, I decided to get married. However, there was someone who opposed Michael living in my family home. It was his mother. She might have felt like her son was being taken away. Michael's family home was occupied by his eldest brother and his family, making it difficult for us to live there. Wanting to save money for our own home, I convinced his mother that starting our married life in my rent-free family home was the best option. Although I heard she always favored the eldest son, she suddenly started paying more attention to Michael after that. I didn't expect such a fuss about Michael moving out of his family home, and our relationship with his mother remained strained after our marriage. Recently, Michael began to pay more attention to his mother. Maybe it's because she started doting on him after our engagement. Pleased with his mother's attention, Michael began to prioritize her above everyone else. Moreover, he would get furious if I didn't put his mother first. I've never neglected her and have always tried to be respectful. Yet, to Michael, it seems like I'm belittling his mother compared to my own. Of course, he would never discuss such matters in front of my mother. When we were alone, Michael constantly complained about it. Due to his nagging, I frequently visited his family home. I bring my mother-in-law's favorite souvenir and call her properly before I go, but she's often not home. I felt blatantly avoided, but I had no choice but to visit them. If I didn't, it was clear that my mother-in-law would complain to my husband, saying things like, "She never shows her face, even though she's your wife," or "She doesn't even bring a single gift." Every time, Cindy, who is married to my husband's eldest brother, would apologetically receive the gifts and pass them on to my mother-in-law. It seemed she too was receiving a lot of nagging from her mother-in-law, and we would talk about how tough it is for both of us. Since we were the same age, we got along very well. Initially, our relationship was strained, but I had thought that over time, my mother-in-law's attitude would soften. However, this turned out to be a significant misjudgment. Even after 8 years of marriage, her attitude hadn't changed. These 8 years have seen many changes. My father-in-law passed away, and Michael's brother had twins. There have been many changes in the family. Especially now, Michael's family home is bustling. The eldest son and his wife have many children. They now have 5 kids in total, including the recently born twins. And all of them are boys. As his mother was overwhelmed by the hustle and bustle, Michael consulted with me about letting her stay in our house for a short while to give her a break. In reality, Michael's eldest brother had asked her to help out with the household chores since his wife was having a hard time. However, because she didn't want to do them, she was instead saying she wanted to come to our house, Cindy told me. Although we had spare rooms, our house was too old and needed to be repaired. I suggested to Michael that we might need to renovate if his mother was to stay with us temporarily. He seemed surprised by my agreement, as he expected me to oppose the idea. I wasn't keen on it, but I agreed, thinking it might help Cindy. Michael works for a construction company, so renovation is his expertise. I could trust him with everything. "I'll leave it to you since it's your area of expertise," I said, deciding to renovate the house. It was a good opportunity since my mother was getting older. And I was considering making the house more accessible by removing steps and adding handrails. During the renovation, my mother and I temporarily stayed at my sister's house, while Michael stayed in a weekly rental apartment with his mother. However, on the day the renovation was completed, an incident occurred. Up until then, I had believed our home was being transformed into a comfortable living space. Michael showed us around the house. There were no steps, and handrails had been installed everywhere, making it suitable for long-term living even in old age. Michael had made a hobby room for himself, but I let that slide. After all, he was the one who spearheaded the renovation, so I thought it was fair. After he had shown us every room, I realized something. There were no rooms for my mother or me. The room my mother used to use had been turned into his mother's room. Michael, where's my mother's room? You haven't shown it to us yet. It was odd not to have a room for my mother, although I could be flexible with mine. I just showed you, didn't I? He said this with a sly grin. I asked him because he hadn't shown us. I had a bad feeling. What? You haven't shown it to us. You and your mother will stay in this 72 square foot storage room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Indeed, he had shown us a 72 square foot storage room earlier. It was the darkest place in the house, barely lit by sunlight. It was a dark room with just a small window. What? You must be joking. Don't say such ridiculous things. As I confronted Michael, his mother intervened between us. Unbelievable, 8 years as his wife and still no proper training. Arguing with your husband like this is a total failure as a wife. This house has been beautifully rebuilt by Michael. If you don't like that room, then get a divorce and leave. His mother's sudden mention of a divorce was too much for me, and I lost my temper. Thinking I wouldn't actually divorce, Michael was just smirking. At that moment, all the love and bond of our 8-year marriage vanished. So, this was your plan all along. If you don't like the storage room, why don't you put your mother in a facility? Since there's no room for her here. It must be hard having 2 mothers under one roof, right? I glared at Michael, who had the audacity to say such things. I remembered something Cindy had told me before. Ever since the renovation was decided, Michael and his mother were inseparable, always whispering something together. Maybe Michael, who had never been pampered before, was acting like a child in front of his brother and nephews, craving his mother's attention. She said. Since the renovation plan started, his mother was looking forward to a new house and a quiet environment. And Michael was excited to live with his beloved mother. Seeing the two of them grinning together made me feel sick. I grabbed my mother, who was standing there in shock, and stormed out of the house with heavy footsteps, intentionally stomping down the hallway, hoping to leave marks. My mother followed me in a fluster. Behind us, we could hear the triumphant laughter of Michael and his mother. I couldn't forgive Michael's betrayal after 8 years of marriage. All I could think of was revenge. When my mother and I finally arrived back at my sister's house, we were utterly exhausted. Too much had happened for words. My mother was still in shock. Are we? Is our home being taken over? She murmured this after taking a sip of tea my sister offered. Her words pained my heart. This was the result of my blind trust in Michael, leaving the entire renovation to him. We have to take back our house. It's filled with memories. The house that Dad built for us. I squeezed my mother's hand as she murmured. But such a half-hearted approach wouldn't satisfy me. That's not enough. We need to do this thoroughly. At my words, my mother, who had been looking down, raised her face. What will we do? I have a plan. I shared my plan with my mother. She looked a bit surprised, but nodded quietly. If it's your idea, Rachel, I won't oppose it. With my mother's words, our counterattack against Michael and his mother began. Later, when I approached my childhood home, I noticed a moving truck parked outside. From afar, I could see Michael's mother moving her belongings in. The sheer amount of stuff made it clear that this was not a temporary stay. She intended to live there permanently. She didn't even move an inch, instead directing Michael on where to place her belongings. Michael appeared delighted to assist with the move. Seeing his face only intensified my anger towards them both. After observing the situation at the house, I sought the company of a real estate agent and visited a lawyer we relied upon. I believed this was the only way to counteract Michael's betrayal. I recounted the entire situation to the lawyer, how Michael and his mother had usurped the house following the renovation, and we determined a plan of action. Initially surprised by my story, the lawyer soon shared our indignation after learning about Michael's appalling behavior. Thus, I gained the complete support of both the lawyer and the real estate agent. A week after Michael and his mother had commandeered my childhood home, I paid a visit again. When I pressed the doorbell, Michael's mother answered cheerfully with a casual "I'm coming." "Who is it?" "Oh, it's you too." Her expression turned to disdain upon seeing me. "I've come to discuss something important today. I'll be coming in." "Oh, sorry. You seemed so much like the owner of this house. I almost forgot it's actually mine," I said with heavy sarcasm as I boldly entered the house. The home, now renovated with new furniture and appliances, had lost all resemblance to the childhood home of my memories. It felt as though my youthful memories had been completely swept away. Michael was lounging in the living room. Upon seeing me, his reaction mirrored his mother's as he grumbled, "What's this, barging into someone's house unannounced?" "Michael, long time no see. I have something important to discuss, so I came here." I sat across from him at the table with the lawyer also present. "What is it? Decided to live in the 72 square foot room? Moving in alone, I suppose? With such a small room, you can't bring much." Irritated by his comments, I reminded myself to stay calm. Today, I was determined to keep my composure. After all, I was on the winning side. There's no rush. Before we jump to any conclusions, I have a question for you. Why did he renovate my childhood home this way and kick my mother and me out? I wanted to figure out what was his real intention. I believed we had a good relationship as a married couple. I thought his relationship with my mother was fine too. I couldn't comprehend why his attitude had shifted so dramatically. It was too extreme to be simply influenced by his mother. At my query, Michael let out a large, exasperated sigh. And he smirked in a belittling manner again. I grew tired of it. Tired of living like a son-in-law, always being mindful of you and your mother. I've been enduring it all this time. I just want to live with my mother, nobody else," he exclaimed in a semi-irate tone, leaving me in disbelief. He was just a mama's boy. His remarks were so ludicrous I was at a loss for words. Stunned and speechless, I listened as Michael started unleashing his pent-up frustrations. He complained about not being able to live with his mother, and feeling ashamed as a man to be living in his wife's family home. It felt as if I had been deceived, a total reversal of everything he had ever said. His self-imposed patience and subsequent outburst, including his plot to take over my family home, almost seemed psychopathic. If you had so many issues, why didn't you just talk about them? How could I say that? I'm a man. You should have understood without me having to say anything. He shot back, his argument sounding utterly absurd. His mother, listening to all of this, became tearful. I believed this was all a result of her favoring her eldest son, but she didn't seem to see it that way. She appeared to simply pity her son, who was now showing her affection. Faced with this melodramatic family scenario, I couldn't contain my frustration and let out a deep sigh. Michael's voice grew louder, seemingly irked by my attitude. "What's with that attitude? You should be grateful that I even prepared a 72 square foot room for you too. I could have eliminated your rooms altogether." His face turned red as he spoke, resembling a child throwing a tantrum. "Right. Keeping a room for such a terrible wife. How kind of him. Thanks. Being praised by you makes me happy, Mom." Eager to end this farce quickly, I placed a divorce paper in front of Michael. Of course, I had already filled them in, ready to file. "Please divorce me. I don't want to be married to you after what you've done." Then, I showed him the registration of the house, explaining that it was part of my inheritance from my father and in my name. Upon seeing the documents, Michael seemed to realize something. "I won't divorce. I did the renovation. Even if it's in your name, it should be considered jointly owned. I absolutely won't divorce." Apparently, he thought he would be kicked out of the house if we divorced. Why he thought he could continue to stay here even if he didn't divorce was beyond me. This house is in my name. It's mine. That's why I've sold it. I then presented another document, a contract for the sale of the land and house. Michael and his mother leaned in to check the names and dates on the document. This house is already sold, so please vacate as soon as possible. It looks like we'll have a new buyer soon, so please leave today or tomorrow. I informed them with a smile, watching their faces turn pale. Whether you divorce me or not, you can't live here anymore. I don't want to see your face anymore, so I want a divorce. What? Why? Wasn't it your house? Michael's mother seemed to have misunderstood that the house belonged to her son. Who? He probably didn't expect me to take such drastic measures. He likely thought I would propose some sort of compromise and forgive him. But I'm not that naive, and my love for my husband had already faded. I had no compassion left for him. Please discuss the details with the lawyer. Don't come to me directly. Where should we go if we're kicked out of this house? How can this be? I thought I'd finally found a quiet place to spend my retirement and even a maid. She had always considered my mother and me as mere housekeepers, not family. Thinking it was unhealthy to continue this conversation, I said, "You can go back to your original home and live with your eldest son and his family." "Oh, but you might not be welcomed since you said you were relieved to leave that noisy house." With that, I quickly left my childhood home. It was a house filled with memories. I hesitated to sell it, actually. But after being ridiculed to this extent, I couldn't back down. In reality, the house had already changed beyond recognition. I believe my decision was correct. 3 days later, Michael and his mother hurriedly left the house. I didn't want to keep a house remodeled to their whims, so I had it demolished and sold the land. Seeing the now empty land, I felt a mix of sadness and relief, a complex emotion. Afterward, Michael and his mother temporarily returned to their original home, where they were treated as nuisances by his eldest brother and his family. Michael, who was reluctant to divorce until the end, seemed to understand my feelings had completely cooled when I left all negotiations to the lawyer. According to the lawyer, he eventually signed the divorce papers while in tears. In the end, Michael became disappointed with his mother, who had started to curry favor with his eldest brother again. He thought he had finally become her favorite, but it didn't last. This ordeal led to his mother being estranged from his eldest brother's family as well. Michael and his mother started living together in a small apartment near their workplace. Michael, who had never lived alone properly, seems to be struggling. And his mother complains daily about having to do all the housework herself while nagging him about his low earnings. I receive weekly messages from Michael begging for help with the unbearable life with his mother and asking to get back together. But I ignore all of them. It's unbelievable that he still thinks reconciliation is possible after everything that happened. He's truly foolish. I have no intention of remarrying. Instead, on the modest piece of land left by my father, I built a small new home where I now live with my mother. It's a small, single-story house, just for the two of us, but it's filled with things my mother and I enjoy. I continue working, so financially, I have no worries. My mother, who was initially shocked by the loss of our family home, is gradually regaining her spirits. Cindy, although no longer family, still visits our new home with her children. I'm truly grateful that she continues to treat us the same, even after the divorce. The new life with my mother has just begun. We laugh together, looking forward to enjoying our future.